Welcome to Two Tall Guys Talking Sales. I'm your host for this session. I'm Sean.
And I'm Kevin.
And together we're going to talk about a unique problem that you might be having in your sales process and your sales world. This 15 minutes is designed for salespeople, sales managers, and CEOs of the company that are trying to increase their revenue and trying to be more productive in your sales processes. So let's get started. If you are a sales leader and you are giving the same advice that made you successful when you were a young salesperson first out there making things happen for yourself, and you're giving that same advice to the salesperson today that is struggling, you're probably giving bad advice. Kevin, what do you think about that?
I like that you come out of the gate swinging. You're hitting us sales leaders in our sore spots. For some of us, have been a long time since we've sold actively, since we've carried a quota. We've been leading people for a long time. If I was suggesting to do the same things now that I was doing when I first started selling, I'd be doing it without a phone, without email. It would be very, very analog. I'd be showing up trying to get past gatekeepers before they got in the morning. And that just doesn't work anymore because the gatekeeper is no longer sitting at a desk preventing access. It's spam filters, it's any number of things, spam blockers on our phones. Yeah, this is a hot topic for new reps and people leading reps in this sales environment.
I agree. We had Kelly Crandall on a few weeks ago, and if people haven't listened to that episode or those two episodes, they really should, because she actually talked about it a little bit, that if they're being ghosted, which happens a lot, and ghosting, by the way, is a modern term, relatively modern term, but it means that you can't get a hold of the person that you're trying to get to, and they're not returning your phone call, and they're not returning your email. But if you're being ghosted, that's probably because you didn't do the right things earlier in the sales cycle, even to the last meeting that you just had, setting up the next meeting for that conversation. And that's something that when I was young, I never had to worry about because being ghosted wasn't a thing. That would be impolite to do that to a salesperson, at least here in the Midwest where I've made my career. But in the reality of today, it's really easy to be ghosted because our prospects are busy, and salespeople have to be more in tune with that, and they have to think ahead a little bit more. The things that I did when I was a young salesperson no longer work. And now it's as simple as, we need to follow up on this conversation. I'd like to go over this quote with you. I'd like to sit down and go over my proposal or my partial proposal with you. Let's set up a time right now. Because now, different from when I was young, everybody has their calendar with them all the time. It's right there on their phone. Let's get our phones out. Let's set up another time right now that we're going to meet. And never leave a meeting before setting up the next meeting. Because in B2B sales, which is a long sales cycle, we have this situation where as long as the prospect is talking to us, then we're making progress. We're moving forward. It's when they are ghosting us that we're in trouble. We got to sell around that. That's just one example of the advice that I potentially could give if I was giving the same advice, what made me successful. That advice would not be good advice today.
At a high level, we're talking about what do you do when the market shifts? That's what do we do as leaders, and what do we do to coach people in a better way when a market shifts? We've got to adapt. My wife says, hey, we got to have capacity and capabilities thinking. Because if we just stay where we are and expect different results, or do the consistent behaviors and expect different results, that's the definition of insanity. We're thinking about things from the perspective of market shifts. We can call that pandemic. We can call that recession, because there's always something in the market. There's election years, there's interest rate hikes or reductions, there's pandemics, there's geopolitical issues and wars. There's always something in the market that's causing a shift. As leaders, we got to be nimble enough to recognize those as a leadership role, but also as a coaching role to help people understand their role in the market and how they sell differently or sell based on those market factors. What are some of the fun tips and tricks? How do we help people adapt? I'm a name it and address it. That's my style. Call it out into the light and talk about it and figure out what works as a team. Lead by walking around.
I usually start the conversation with a quote by Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks is in the movie. It's not his original quote. Somebody wrote it for him, I'm sure. And I adapted a little bit. It's a movie that we've all seen. It's called A League of Their Own. And in that movie, the star of the movie that wasn't Tom Hanks is crying. And they're playing baseball. And Tom Hanks comes out of the dugout and yells in her face and say, "There's no crying in baseball." And I just adapt that a little bit and say, there's no crying in sales. The reality is this is a hard job and we need to think on our feet. We need to get ahead of it and we need to get through problems that come up. I always start with that little story of there is no crying in sales. A lot of times people will say, but the economy sucks. And you just listed a bunch of reasons why, Kevin, but the economy sucks. There's something going wrong in the economy that is out of my control. It's not my fault. It's not the company's fault. It's not even the prospect's fault. It's just the screwed up economy. We got a screwed up president, regardless of what your political situation is. We have wars, we have pandemics, whatever. This is going to go on for the rest of your life. Look, there's no crying in sales. Get over it. Our job is to create revenue for our companies. And we need to do that regardless of what the world throws at us because there is no crying in sales. We need to go and realize that just because the economy is a little screwed up and bad things are happening and some bank just closed or whatever, it's okay because our market share was probably not affected that much. Most of the clients that I work with, most of the people listening to this podcast work for non-Fortune 500 sales organizations. They work for smaller companies or mid-sized companies. And their market that they're going after is $1 billion in size, $5 billion in size, maybe it's $20 billion in size. And they are not even getting anywhere close to market penetration. They are probably less than 1%, probably less than 10%, almost definitely less than 10% of the market. Even when the economy is going badly, you can say, look, there are still a lot of orders that are out there that we can go out and get, and we can still beat our competition. We can still win. We can still be good partners with our prospects. And let's focus on Mr. Customer. That just means you have more problems, more economic strife within your organization. I can help you even more. And if we start talking about how do we help our clients, how we help our customers, then we are going to be more successful at driving home revenue. I've just talked a lot, Kevin. Any thoughts about that?
When you're on a roll, there's no reason to interrupt someone. You never sell past yes. While you were talking, there were three things that came out of that. And I'm really glad you talked about the total addressable market, meaning the total market size being billions of dollars. If you've only got 5 zeros after your number, you don't have $1 million worth of penetration, let alone 6 zeros or 7 zeros. The numbers are so big that are the total addressable market. We have to figure out what we actually have the capacity to serve. If we've got capacity to sell, there is enough business in the market to fill that void. Now we get to think about the psychology of the salesperson. We've got to think about the people we're leading. We do this as a practice. We are fractional sales leaders. We lead salespeople. This is part of what the Sean and the Kevin think about when we're working with clients. The psychology of the salesperson. How do we know when they're having a non-adaptive kind of moment? Where do we see their breakdown? It's either mental or it's behavioral or it's belief in the product. They think a new product has entered the market that's better than the one they're selling. They may feel like, oh, shucks, I don't have a market competitive product anymore. And you've seen this happen with salespeople, and it looks like, oh, I've got a discount. Oh, I've got to change my sales tech. Oh, the marketing's not good enough. You see all these excuses coming up. Breaking that psychological bond is really important for us as sales leaders and coaches. The second thing I was thinking about is, as a sales leader, anyone listening to this podcast, what are the leading indicators that you should be picking up on? The leading indicators become really important, and they'll relate specifically to the third point, which is reframing the value. So first, the leading indicators. When somebody's quote volume, not just the dollars, but the actual count. Did I do 1, 5, 10, or 100 quotes? When that volume decreases, that's a leading indicator. if they're not prospecting a network, if they're not growing their number of connected relationships, you've got a problem. We've got to look earlier in the lead gen and selling process to make sure we don't have a endpoint quota attainment issue. We've got to pick up earlier. Then you get the sloppiness factor. How many times have we seen the same person make the same error over and over and over and not adapting? This goes back to our main premise here. If we're given bad advice, we got to change the advice. If somebody is giving themselves bad advice of, hey, I do my sales process this way, and for some reason I'm not winning anymore. I used to be President's Club, and now I'm barely making quota. Tying back to that becomes a really important identifier for sales leaders and owners. If you don't have a sales leader, look at your sales team. Look at their performance in quantity of activities, not necessarily just the quota dollars. And I know I'm treading on thin ice talking about activity-based selling, and that's not the only goal here, but we can dig into that separately. But the third thing is reframing that value. And now, Sean, I'm talking a lot here. My apologies there for hogging all the airtime. But reframing the value, we got to think through how our clients and their customers measure value. If I'm talking to someone about their business, I shouldn't be talking about my features. I should be talking about their problems, their customers' problems, and how do they solve them. If I can't make it relevant to the way their customers do business or they do business, I'm really not leading well. I've got to find that value and speak in terms that they use, not that I use.
I'm going to lean into that last thing you just talked about, Kevin, because I really love that advice. And I think that's advice that survives all downturns in the economy. It survives everything bad that can happen, everything that's screwed up, a new competitor moving into town, all of that stuff. How well do you know your prospect? Do you really know how they make money? Do you really know how they lose money? Do you really know about the conflicts that they have within their company and the challenges that they're having? And how can you, as a vendor or a potential vendor to that prospect, how can you help them be more profitable? And how can you be helping them solve problems that they don't even know about yet? And when you can become a trusted advisor to your client, whatever the economy throws at you really doesn't matter. Whatever problems are happening really doesn't matter. We talked about originally that this was all about adapting. This podcast is all about adapting, but really it's not. It's really how well does your sales team understand their prospect? Because the sales team that really understands what's going on in their prospect, how that prospect is successful, that sales team is almost always going to be successful. I really want to push sales leaders to ask questions of your sales team about how do they make money? How does that company work? Who are their competitors? And do it in a way where you're teaching your salespeople to be sales trusted advisors.
Absolutely. And Sean, we're not going to overstep our trust with our listening audience here because we're right at 15 minutes. My biggest takeaway from today is exactly what you just covered, the value and understanding how our customers offer value to the market. If we can't connect those dots, we've got a mountain of work to do. And if you're looking for somebody to help you charge that mountain and do that work with your company, Sean and I can be a resource for you. We've got a catalog of content here on the podcast. Come check us out on our CEO workshop series on LinkedIn. We offer these things to the market because we know that businesses can be better versions of themselves with a little bit of pushing and steering. Sean, with that, let's sign off and happy selling.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Happy selling.
And that's a wrap. Thanks again for joining Kevin and Sean on Two Tall Guys Talking Sales. Tune in every Tuesday or when our podcast drops every Tuesday at 4:30, wherever you consume your podcast. And don't miss our monthly CEO workshop where we unpack some of the big CEO questions facing your business. Until next time, we're looking forward to seeing you. Happy selling.